Usually when we think about fixing a complex machine, there's this underlying expectation of finding a broken part.
Right, like a snap belt or a blown fuse.
Exactly. You run a diagnostic, you pull out the bad component, put a new one in, and suddenly everything runs perfectly. But, well, what if you're looking at a machine that isn't broken at all?
What if it's just operating on an entirely different manual?
Yeah. And that is exactly what we are opening up today. Welcome to the deep dive. Our mission today is to explore a profound, first-hand account of neurodivergence, specifically looking at the autistic mind.
It's such an incredible source text we have today.
It really is. We're pulling from an excerpt of an essay titled The Same Thing, What I Love About Being Autistic. And it's written by an author named Jaime. And just a quick note for you listening, she pronounces her name J-A-Me, and she uses sure pronouns.
And Jamie's piece, it's remarkable because it challenges our most basic assumptions about how brains work.
Yeah.
She presents this central thesis right at the beginning that is, honestly, it's almost startling.
Yeah. She says the thing that almost killed her in her 20s is the exact same thing she has built her entire life and success from since.
Right. It's not a paradox. It's just the reality of what it takes to finally get an operating manual for a brain that was never actually broken.
To really understand how she eventually thrived, we have to start in the raw, terrifying reality of her early life. Jaime describes her brain as processing and this is a quote, whole field at once.
The whole field, right?
No sequence, no hierarchy, nothing like that.
Think about the biological reality of that for a second. For most people, the brain acts as this massive filter.
Right. It kind of limits what you take in.
Exactly. It actively suppresses most of the sensory information around you so you can just, focus on one linear task. But Jamie's brain doesn't have that limiter.
Wow.
So pattern recognition is happening at a scale and a speed that the surrounding world simply isn't built for.
Yeah.
Every conversation, every room, every relational signal.
It's all just hitting her at once. Simultaneously. Unfiltered and unranked. None of it is quieted down before it lands.
Okay, let's unpack this, because I was trying to wrap my head around what that actually feels like. And the best analogy I could come up with is, imagine you have this high-powered satellite dish.
Right.
And it's downloading every single frequency in the galaxy simultaneously. Just a massive wall of noise and data. But instead of giving her a tuner to sort through the frequencies, the medical system solution was basically to just pour concrete over the entire dish.
That is exactly what happened, because she lacked what she calls a gestalt.
Like a vocabulary for it.
Right, a conceptual frame for what her nervous system was actually doing. And without that, she eventually collapsed under the sheer weight of all that unfiltered data.
Which brings us to that devastating intersection with the medical system.
And we have to talk about why the medical system failed so entirely here. Clinical systems rely heavily on preferred languages and highly specific scripts,
Yeah, they need a standardized input to give you a diagnosis. Exactly. So when a patient lacks that specific language, when they can't translate their interior experience into the exact kind of sequential linear report the clinician wants to hear.
The system assumes the machine is broken.
Right. The system interprets that absence of language as evidence of a fundamentally broken mind, which results in active harm rather than help.
And they tried to fix it with medication. And the imagery Jaime uses to describe this is just vivid and horrifying. She calls it a chemical straitjacket.
It's a heavy description.
She says her existence became like a peat bog. Like the thought was still technically present in her mind, but it was dragging through this, she calls it an ancient wet dark. Every sentence she tried to form was just suctioned under before it could even stand up. And meanwhile, her medical charts were just filled with these conclusions built entirely from translation failure.
Which is tragic, really.
It makes me wonder, and I'm asking this seriously, how can anyone possibly advocate for themselves in a clinical setting when the very thing they are suffering from is a lack of vocabulary to explain their interior wreckage?
It's incredibly difficult,
Yeah.
often impossible. Because like you said, the system's fix didn't treat her. It just buried her processor under a chemical peat bog.
So if the system just buried her, how did Jaime finally escape it? She obviously couldn't medicate her way out of this. She needed a completely new framework to even understand her own machinery.
And she found that framework. But she found it through a person, not a medical protocol.
Her first mentor.
Yes, her first mentor. He looked at her and did something truly revolutionary. He correctly identified her brain not as a pathology, not as something broken, but as a field processor.
Oh, field processor.
Right, a machine running without the limiter that most nervous systems naturally develop.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because he actually offered a hypothesis for why it exists. He suggested this unregulated field might actually be a product of natural selection.
Right, which makes so much sense if you look at evolutionary biology. Imagine being in a hunter-gatherer society, having a few individuals who process the entire environmental field simultaneously. Someone who immediately notices a fractional shift in the weather, the subtle snap of a twig, a change in the group's micro-expressions all at once.
That would keep the tribe alive.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's an incredibly powerful evolutionary advantage. The problem is just that our modern, highly structured world doesn't build any infrastructure for it.
So this mentor basically gave her operating knowledge. He explained the mechanism, like this is what it is, this is why it runs, and this is what happens when it doesn't have a framework.
Which caused a massive physiological shift for her.
Yeah, and for you listening, this is fascinating. The physical storm of the field in Jamie's brain didn't actually stop. The data didn't magically filter itself. But just naming the storm changed her body's orientation to it.
Right.
She compares it to the difference between being in weather with no road signs and weather you know the name of. And it really makes you question, how much of human suffering is just weather without road signs.
Oh, a tremendous amount. Because by framing the brain as designed rather than broken, this mentor shifted Jamie from a state of pathology to a state of utility.
Yeah.
Knowing what the machine is the absolute prerequisite to learning how to drive it.
But knowing you have this uniquely powerful, unregulated engine, that's really only step one.
Right, because identifying a hurricane doesn't stop it from blowing your house down.
Exactly. Step two is figuring out how to actually put it in gear without burning the whole thing out. And the operating manual for that came from a completely unexpected source.
The second mentor.
Yeah, a Shuaijiao wrestling coach.
Which is wild. Shuaijiao is a specific style of ancient Chinese wrestling, right?
Right. And he unknowingly handed Jamie the exact operating manual she needed for a field processor. He taught her a framework from a guy named Maxwell Maltz.
And Maxwell Maltz wasn't a neurologist.
No, not at all.
He was a plastic surgeon in the mid-20th century. He wrote this famous book called Psycho-Cybernetics. And Maltz theorized that you give the mind a task, let it work beneath your conscious attention, and just crust it to surface when it's ready.
Wait, hold on. Let me push back on that a bit, because to someone listening, that almost sounds like, I don't know, manifestation nonsense. You're telling me she just gave her brain a prompt, walked away, and the work did itself. How does that uniquely synergize with the field processor concept?
It sounds like magic until you look at how the brain actually works. Instead of forcing information through an unnatural, conscious, step-by-step sequence, which Jamie calls the sanctioned route.
Right, the linear way.
Yeah. Instead of doing that, Jamie allowed her brain to process the entire gestalt simultaneously in the subconscious. The coach meant it for athletic prep, totally not knowing Jamie was autistic. But it was the perfect method for a field processor.
So she tested it, small tasks first. She gave her mind a task, the field ran, returned, and delivered.
It worked.
It worked.
Yeah.
So then she gives it what she calls an audacious task. She decided to write an entire book called Forensic Photoshop. She gave her mind the full scope of the problem and just stepped back and let the field work.
5 weeks.
Yeah, 5 weeks of accumulating pressure beneath the surface. And I want to ask you listening right now, what stands out to you here? Because to me, it sounds absolutely terrifying to just hand over a massive project to your subconscious and wait for weeks, trusting that the architecture is actually being built in the dark.
It takes immense trust, because her brain only surfaced the information when the whole architecture was ready to be discharged.
And when it discharged, she had this breakthrough night of impossible sleep. She sat down, she typed until her body literally gave out, woke up, and kept typing.
Incredible.
The draft was done in a week, the manuscript in 5 weeks, and that book sold on every continent and still does today.
She finally learned to run the processor as designed.
Right, which led to a doctorate and 2 decades of success. But so what does this all mean for her physically? Because finding the operating manual didn't instantly erase the physical damage done by years of the wrong treatment.
No, it didn't. We have to look at the long tail of systemic harm here and the sheer physical cost of running a high-capacity processor.
Because it takes energy.
Immense energy. Running a supercomputer requires heavy-duty cooling systems. It took her most of a decade just for the medication to leave her system. She had to reclaim a body that had been completely managed by other people's frameworks.
It's like the management of her condition by outsiders had become its own kind of weather she had to survive.
That's exactly it. The interventions themselves were causing harm, so she had to learn to use diet as a regulatory tool.
To lengthen her windows of rest.
Yes, giving the field the exact conditions it needs to run without, as she puts it, burning the whole system to the ground.
And during that process, she released 160 pounds of unnecessary weight that had accumulated under those unneeded medications.
Which just shows the physical toll of the wrong treatment.
Yeah, and she mentioned she currently operates on roughly 5 hours of sleep a night. She is still learning, still finding the edges of what this processor costs and what it needs to maintain itself.
Because the ongoing work of self-regulation never really stops.
No, it doesn't. But crucially, Jaime uses the word love here. And she uses it very carefully, knowing the immense cost. But she loves that her brain was always doing exactly what it was built to do.
The hardware was never broken. The problem was never the mind. The problem was the active harm of systems that demand a specific language and punish people who don't speak it naturally.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, Jaime's story is just this beautiful testament to the fact that divergent minds aren't broken. They just require a different operating manual.
Exactly. Through the recognition from her mentors, she learned to hold whole fields, run these complex problems subconsciously, and return with the architecture already built.
And she still uses it today for her writing, her students, her family. So for you listening, I want you to think about your own internal tabs and processes. Are you trying to force your own brain into a sanctioned route that just doesn't fit the way you work?
It's a great question. And I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over. We talked about Jaime's first mentor, who suggested that field processors evolved without limiters due to natural selection.
Yeah, the evolutionary advantage.
Right. So if that's true, what specific, massive, complex problems in our modern world is the unregulated autistic mind perfectly evolved to solve? Problems that neurotypical brains with all their sequential linear filters might be entirely blind to.